So we're going to continue our study on two-step equations, but this time we're going to involve some fractions with these. It's pretty much the same thing we did in our last video, except for we have a couple fractions. These are adding and subtracting, multiplying fractions. These are all things that you have done, so this should be a review for you as we do these. If not, that's okay. Just make sure you're paying attention to these. We'll try to do the best review we can. So our goal, by the time we are done with today's lesson and video and assignment, we want to be able to say I can solve a two-step equation with fractions by using inverse operations. So let's take a look. First off, two-step equation is an equation that requires two operations to solve for the variable, just like our past video. So here, once again, our goal is we want to isolate the variable. And the steps that we do are usually, first, we're going to look to undo the addition or subtraction. And second, undo the multiplication or division. And then there are some times where we actually have to flip the steps. I should have an S. If the adding or subtracting is inside of another fraction, which we won't really see many of those, or maybe even any of those in this case. But just so you know, like, that is an option. It's not always going to be these two steps. Sometimes they have to be in reverse, depending on where the addition or subtraction is inside of your equation. So let's take a look at some examples here. So we have 2/5 x plus 2 equals 6. All right, so we're not going to have to worry about multiplying first. So we're just going to take care of this 2 first by subtracting 2 on both sides, because the opposite of addition is subtraction. So that goes away, or they cancel out and turn into a 0. So I'm left with 2/5 x equals 4. Okay, I'm actually going to erase this for a second. And I'm going to write it two different ways, or I'm going to solve it two different ways, depending on how you may have learned how to solve these equations. So I'm going to start over here with 2/5 x equals 6. Now, if you look at this, this is kind of like saying 2 times x, and this is kind of like x is being divided by 5. So we can do these in two steps. That we're going to multiply by 5 first and get rid of that 5. Multiply by 5 over here, and we end up with a 2x equals 30. So you can multiply by the bottom number first, and then at this point, we're going to go ahead and divide both sides by 2, and we get x equals 15. Now, if you do it that way, that's actually going to end up being like 3 steps to be able to solve this equation. But that might be a way that you may have learned how to solve something like this in the past, like in 7th grade. Or you may have learned it this way. This is the way that I prefer to do it. We get 2/5 x equals 6, because we already subtracted the 2. Now, instead of doing it in 2 different steps, what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. Now, a reciprocal is when you take this fraction and you flip it. So instead of having 2 over 5, I'm going to multiply it by 5 over 2. Why would I do something like that? Well, what happens is I get a 5 on the top and a 5 on the bottom, and guess what? They cancel each other out. And we have a 2 on the top and a 2 on the bottom, and they cancel each other out. So what do I have left on the left side of my equation? Is just an x. Okay, but whatever I do to one side, I have to do it to the other side. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to multiply by 5/2. Now notice this 6 doesn't have a number below it. If you ever have a whole number or constant, you can always just put it over 1. Okay, now we're just going to multiply. 6 times 5 is 30 on top. 1 times 2 is 2 on the bottom, and 30 divided by 2 is 15. So notice we got a 15 in either case. Now, if you want to double check, we could do 2/5 times 15 plus 2, and it should, or it does, equal 6 if you want to plug it back in. Okay, let's take a look at another one of those. Well, this one's slightly different. This time, the constant's a fraction. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to add this number right here. Okay, so we're going to get rid of the subtraction. Add 1/3 to both sides. That goes away. Okay, 1 plus 1/3. So remember, if I have a whole number, I can go ahead and put it over 1. So if you remember, when you're adding or subtracting fractions, you have to have a common denominator. So what or how can we turn this 1 into a 3? Well, I can times 1 by 3, and 1 times 3 is 3. But whatever I do to the denominator must be done to the numerator. So I also have to times the numerator by 3. So this all ends up 3 times 3 is 3 over 3 plus 1 over 3. This ends up being 4/3 when I add those together. If you're in need of using a calculator, that is just fine. If you want to use a calculator, plug that in. So I end up getting a 4/3 equals 2x. Okay, and then for my final step, we're going to go ahead and divide both sides by 2. Now, dividing by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. What's the reciprocal of 2? Well, that would be 1/2. That is not what I wanted to do. Let's go back. So instead of dividing both sides by 2, I'm just going to multiply by the reciprocal. So if I had the number 2 and I flipped it over, it would end up being a 1/2. So we're going to times this by the reciprocal, and the 1/2 and the 2 cancel each other out. And x equals 4 times 1 is 4, 2 times 3 is 6, so I get 4/6, which can be simplified because a 2 can go into both of those. Sorry, I hope you can see that yellow. And when I simplify that, I end up with a 2/3 equals x. Okay, it's the same steps as we've been doing always before. We just have fractions. If you prefer to use a calculator, you are more than welcome to use a calculator. There's nothing that says you can't use a calculator on this. I'm just showing you how you can do it by hand. All right, let's do this last one where both things are a fraction. So let's go ahead and get rid of the addition by subtracting 3/4. Subtracting 3/4. All right, so let's go and do a little bit of work over here on the side. So I'm going to get 5. I'm going to put it over 1. I'm going to subtract 3/4. If you want to use a calculator, plug that in your calculator and see what you get. Or we can turn that 1 into a 4 by timesing it by 4 and the top by 4. And I end up with a 20 over 4 minus 3/4, which equals 17/4. Okay, it's usually why people don't like fractions. It gets kind of, can get kind of ugly, I guess, if you want to say it that way. So if I come back over here to my original problem, I've got 1/2 x equals 17/4 is what I got when I did 5 minus 3/4. Okay, 1/2 x equals 17/4. I'm going to go ahead and multiply by the reciprocal. You can divide by 1/2, but it's the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So I'm going to times by 2 over 1, because the 2's cancel out, the 1's cancel out, and I'm left with x. Over here, times this by 2 over 1, and I end up getting 34 over 4. And I notice that that can be simplified. So we're going to go ahead and simplify that. 34 and 4 both have a 2 that can go into it. So we're going to end up with a 2 on the bottom and a 17 on the top. And my answer would be 17/2. Okay? So don't be scared of fractions. If you need to use a calculator, feel free to. In fact, let's do this problem. Let me show you how to do this problem with a calculator. So we're going to go ahead and exit out of this. We'll just go and discard all those. Now, I'm going to use an online graphing calculator called Desmos. Okay, so if you remember, let's see, let's do a split screen. So if you remember, I'll just kind of put that over here. The first thing we did is we did 5, and we subtracted the 3/4 from it. So if I click in here, let's see if I can pull this up. We're going to do 5 minus 3/4, which is 4.25. We're getting a decimal in this time, but that's okay. And so after we got the 4.25, remember, we ended up timesing by the reciprocal. Oops. Let's go back. Oh, there it is. So we're going to take 4.25 because that's the answer it gave me. And we're going to go ahead and times that by the reciprocal, which was 2/1. So we're going to do 2/1 and hit equal. Oops. Hit enter. And we get an 8.5. Now, what was our answer? Remember, we got a 17/2. That was the fraction. And if you notice, 17 divided by 2 is the same thing as 8.5. So if you need to use a calculator, feel free to use it. If your answer ends up in decimals, that's okay for now. I think it would be good for you to have it in a fraction, but if it's in a decimal, no worries about that. So hopefully that all made sense. Please reach out if you have any questions.